Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. One thing that I think is really cool when we look into the education system is that we're learning so much more about how we regulate ourselves, and maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago we thought these kids who can't sit still in class are a problem, and now we're understanding like, hey, movement is super helpful, right? How we regulate ourselves, everybody's a little bit different, but we're doing a better job at coming up with these strategies on how to deal with stress, how to deal with some of these uncomfortable feelings that maybe, our parents, our grandparents didn't really have the tools for. And obviously, that affects us emotionally when we're not given what we need, when we don't give our kids what we need, it affects them. But we're doing better. And I like to think, every generation keeps getting better and better. But one thing that is still kind of a mystery for some people is stress relief. Like we all are stressed on certain levels. Even if you don't think you're stressed, you have stressors, right? There are things that, are difficult, and, we handle them in different ways. Just because you don't have a headache, just because your body is intense, doesn't mean you're not stressed, right? Work causes stress. Kids cause stress. Exercise causes stress, and not all stress is bad stress, right? There's distress, there's eustress, and so some stress causes, very, very productive change, right? When we're working out, we're causing stress to our body, but it's building back stronger, right? When we go through a tough time in our life, if we can learn from it, we can use that as kind of a catapult to move us to that next level in life. And so not all stress is bad, but we do have stress. And one way that people handle stress oftentimes is through food, right? We think people handling stress through food. We think of like alcohol, we think, substance abuse, things like that, and maybe just, like overeating in certain situations, maybe just like dessert and stuff. But you can use any type of food to handle stress. And this isn't something I've heard a ton talk about, and it's something I want to address because I see this in myself. I see it in clients. I see it in family members. It's like, well, we're just eating because, it's just something to do. It makes us feel better, right? It has a sense of control. Look at DoorDash, right? DoorDash is very expensive to get delivered, but it's so easy. We don't care about the fees. We don't care about all of that because it gives us a sense of control. When everything is, it's kind of piling up and it becomes too much, purchasing something can be relieving. It can relieve some stress. That's why people use shopping. That's why Amazon is so popular. Not because we need this, is because we want it, and it helps satisfy that desire, that immediate gratification. But sometimes we use food as a coping mechanism, and we don't even realize it, right? I was having, I actually had a conversation with a client the other day, but this is something that I've seen, in myself. I've seen in some other clients as well, where they were eating because it soothed them. It helped them fall back asleep. And I hear this a lot. I know people get into routines where, it's just the evening, 9:00, 9:30 hits, and maybe they're just standing in the kitchen, you're talking to your wife, and you just open up a can of peanut butter, and or not, hopefully your peanut butter doesn't come in a can, I don't know, a jar of peanut butter. Like you're just sitting there and you're talking and you're taking a couple scoops and stuff, and all of a sudden you're eating 200, 300, 400 calories and not even realizing it, right? Chips are an easy example because it's very difficult to just eat a couple, but it could be other things too, right? It could be, it could be something like, obviously a better choice, maybe like watermelon, but you can stress eat that too. You're just sitting there eating more and more and more candy. A lot of times, typically, the high sugar foods are going to be the foods that we crave the most. Candy and sweets, high sugar, high fat foods like that satisfy kind of that desire very quickly, and so they're much easier to eat. But you can use it with other foods too, right? Sometimes it's just you're having dinner and it's been a tough day, and so you just keep eating a little bit more and a little bit more, and you're not even realizing it. It becomes such a habit that you don't even realize you're doing it anymore. You've been doing it for 5 years, you've been doing it for 10 years. It's been happening so habitually that you don't even think about it. And the conversation I had with my client the other day was that I told him, I want you to imagine that you're on a road trip. When you're traveling with your family, you're going out of town, and you start to get pretty hungry. And as it comes, it starts to build a little bit, and you think, okay, we need to start looking for a place to go eat, because my stomach starts to growl a little bit. And so you think if you wait any longer, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And so you start looking on the highway, you're looking at the exit sign, see what's coming up, and you finally find a place to go. By the time you get there, you park, maybe you get out, use the restroom, fill up with gas, you get the kids out of the car, you order your food, and you realize, like, hey, like I'm actually doing okay. I thought I could only make it another 10 minutes, but now it's been 30 minutes, and I'm feeling pretty good. I can actually wait a little bit longer. And of course, you pulled over to eat, and so you're going to eat, but this happens a lot. I want you to notice this throughout work. When you start to feel hungry, most of the time you're going to eat on a schedule. If you have lunch at the same time every day, you're probably going to start getting hungry around that time, because your body expects food. If you change up your schedule on the weekends, you don't wake up at the same time, you get up at different times, your body's going to kind of be dysregulated a little bit. You could get hungry at odd times here, but I want you to notice that on those days when you do feel really hungry, if you can wait 5 minutes, if you can wait 10 minutes, notice how you feel. Do you feel the same? Chances are probably not, right? Hunger comes and goes. It comes in waves. And so next time you feel this urge to eat, maybe late into the evening, set a timer. Set it for 5 minutes, set it for 10 minutes. And then 10 minutes comes around and you're still really hungry, eat. You're probably hungry, right? Have a glass of water first, then wait 10 minutes. See if you're still hungry. If you're still hungry, go ahead and eat. I'm not telling you that every time you feel hungry, you're not hungry, because that's obviously not true. Like, God designed our bodies, we have these hunger cues for a reason, but sometimes we can kind of get so far away from understanding what our body actually needs in the moment, where every single time we feel hungry, every time our stomach growls, every time we handle stress, and when we handle stress, it can show in our body in lots of different ways. And so we think we're hungry, and so we just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and we're just trying to fill something, which it was never the actual cause in the first place. And so hunger is very rarely ever an emergency. If you've ever tried fasting, maybe you've done intermittent fasting, or you've tried to go 24 hours or a 3-day fast or something, you'll realize pretty quickly that you can go a lot longer without food than you originally thought you could. And it's actually a great way to kind of get back in tune with your body's hunger cues. I most days I don't eat a big breakfast. I used to be pretty big into being very intentional intermittent fasting, and there were days where I would go till like 2 o'clock and I'd be completely fine. I would not have anything and be completely fine. Now, if you're somebody who eats breakfast every single day and you try and go till 2 o'clock tomorrow, it's going to be pretty difficult, because your body's so used to it. Your body's not going to be regulated so your stomach's going to start to growl. But our bodies are incredibly designed, right? We can shift, and we can train it to do incredible things. And so you can push back a meal. If you're used to eating your first meal as soon as you get up, maybe you push it back an hour, right? Maybe if you're used to eating 700-800 calories for lunch, maybe we cut that down to 600. And that's one of the best strategies you can actually use in order to not only lose weight, but maintain your weight long term, is being able to regulate it and doing it in a way that it starts to become more familiar to you, right? The first week of doing anything is going to be uncomfortable. The second week's still going to be pretty difficult. But after you do it for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 months, 3 months in a row, it's going to become much easier. And so if right now you're using food as stress relief in the evening, you've gotten into this habit of just eating so consistently in the evening. Maybe you're watching Netflix, maybe you're watching the season 4 of Reacher on Amazon Prime. That's what my wife and I started watching last night. It's pretty good. Very, very action filled. But a lot of times what my wife would do, we will have a snack, right? But I try and be intentional with it. But sometimes that doesn't happen. When the more tired I get, the more likely I'm going to keep eating. And so the more tired you are, that can affect stress. The more stressed you are, that can affect how tired you are. And so it's kind of a perpetual cycle there. But we can learn to change these things. So just because right now you've been using food as a coping mechanism, or you've been using other things as a way to handle stress that aren't necessarily beneficial to you right now, it doesn't mean that through time and through patience and through practice that you can't improve this. That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.